So this is Cell Metabolism by Jonas, Eric, Amelia, and Benjamin. So cell metabolism consists of chemical reactions that provide energy for the cell to use in other processes in synthesizing organic material. And as you can see, when reactants are converted into one or more products, which occur in things such as like photosynthesis and cellular respiration. And in living organisms, this is made possible by enzyme mediated chemical reactions. So the main chemical processes in living things are very similar. For animals, plants, fungi, and bacteria, they're made up of proteins, and proteins are used for as movement or catalysts or like transporting smaller molecules. And each protein is specific with different organisms, so they have like the same makeup of amino acids. And then there's also similarity in terms of which living things transmit genetic code to their offspring, since DNA is also like really specific in giving information for the synthesis of cell components through four bases: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. And these processes are very alike, but the most important similarity is that living organisms transfer energy between one another. So, fueled by nutrients and solar energy, living cells are able to synthesize molecules that contribute to growth and maintenance. They consume carbohydrates and other organic materials and remove hydrogen atoms to produce energy. So, in plants, in like things such as photosynthesis, it's the gradient between the positively charged hydrogen atoms and negatively charged hydroxide ions that creates ATP from phosphate NADP. And then in animals, oxygen is used to accept electrons from the removal of hydrogen atoms in food to make ATP in the mitochondria. And then in cancer cells, glucose is metabolized through aerobic glycolysis, where their energy is made from glucose being converted to lactate, and even though oxygen is available.
So one of the things that characterizes cancer cells, specifically like malignant cancer cells, is a really fast metabolism in order to grow and survive. They need like as much energy as they can to do this because they're growing and expanding at an unnatural rate. So they need more energy than is natural. And so, like Amelia mentioned, even in the presence of oxygen or aerobic conditions, to get high glucose uptake, they will do they will undergo lactate production. Normally, lactate production only happens, in humans at least, when there isn't enough oxygen. Think when you're exercising and then your muscles get sore. That's because lactate production is happening. You're like, as much as you're breathing in, you can't get oxygen to your muscles fast enough, so it does the lactate production. Um, and this combination of extremely high glucose uptake and lactate production, even when there's oxygen available, is known as the Warburg effect. And you can see in the picture that put it simply, like the fatter arrow goes underneath to the lactate in the Warburg effect. Like what could be done in the normal, like healthy cycle is actually just done with lactate. Um, so obviously the cancer cells need a lot of energy. And so a good method that people have thought of to treat cancer patients could be to just inhibit the cellular metabolism. If they don't have the required energy, they can't grow and they can't even survive. And so, a lot of people have been looking into this.
So in most cancer and tumor cells, the DNA that governs the mitochondria, called mtDNA, is altered. Although it's quite difficult to actually study the physical changes to the DNA that is caused, since each DNA has multiple copies of mtDNA, and each mitochondria has multiple copies of mtDNA. But it's generally known that mitochondria are altered. Um, these genetic changes cause faster metabolism of the cells. Um, Glycolysis, without oxygen, is known to be like the main function of the mitochondria in cancer cells. Studies have shown that the transport of energy in these altered mitochondria differs from regular mitochondria, and evidence of this is the introduction of normal, healthy mitochondria into cells, which leads to cancer cells, which leads to cancer cells showing less cancerous behavior and much slower.
So a good specific example of this is a cancer called, they did a study on malignant pleural mesothelioma, or MPM for short. And it's a rare form of cancer, and it's typically caused by inhalation of asbestos fibers, which you can find in your attic, but maybe don't go looking for it. And so traditional methods of fighting cancer are really expensive, so not everyone can afford it in the first place, and it's also harmful to the rest of your body. It's a little bit like taking the nuclear option to do this certain forms of therapy, because it can, to wipe out the bacteria in your gut, and it can just hurt you. And people want the patient to be as in as good health as possible. And if the cost of cancer, fighting cancer right now is really high, both monetarily and just the toll it takes on your body. And so the study was, they were interested in restricting the metabolism in the cancer cells to limit their ability to grow and spread. And so they used different drugs, a couple of them, to target different metabolic pathways and monitor the glucose uptake. Metabolic pathways are mentioned, like there's like the lactate production way and also the aerobic respiration way. Essentially, it's at a really base level, like the cell needs energy, and there's more than one way to get that energy, and those different ways are the different pathways. So there's the lactate production, the typical aerobic one that Amelia had the picture of. A couple others that cancer cells will take advantage of are the pentose phosphate pathways and the hexazyme pathways. If you were curious, but yeah, they were trying to inhibit a couple particular pathways and wanted to see the effects. And so you can see the results of their data. There's some graphs. The easiest to read are the top row. The white bar is control, and then there's one drug, a different drug, and both of them working concurrently. And the vertical axis represents the glycolytic activity, which is a good indicator of the metabolism rates that are going on. And so you can see that when both drugs are, each drug, it does do its job and inhibits, but when both of them are working concurrently, it's even more effective. This is called synergistic or additive inhibition. And it's important because, contrary to what you might think, it doesn't always work that adding in, two things that work alone is good or well. They don't always work well together. So it's even more effective, and it's exciting that they can do and work together. And it's proved effective in both normoxic and hypoxic conditions. Normoxic and hypoxic refers to the oxygen tension or the oxygen pressure in the area. Tumor growth is often in hypoxic conditions, especially in MPM. And one reason that this is, and to tie into other stuff, is oxygen can suppress sugar fermentation, which happens in lactate production. And so because in these regions with no oxygen, that's why the lactate production can happen so much, because there's not a lot of oxygen to inhibit this fermentation. So it might be a response to hypoxia, though researchers are not 100% sure.
Okay, so in many forms of science, the most fundamental things, so in mathematics, addition, or in physics, Newton's laws, they often are limited in applications because of how far the sciences have advanced, which is obviously a great thing. But luckily with biology, that's not the case yet. As Amelia showed, cell metabolism is one of the most foundational parts of biology. And as Jonas and Benjamin just showed, cell metabolism still has far and many places to go, especially with the treatment of cancer. So currently, cancer is costing people around the globe trillions of dollars and affecting millions of people all around. And in addition to just being expensive, cancer treatment completely ravages the body, as Jonas said, by taking the nuclear out and then destroying many other things with it. But currently, that's the best option. But if we can find a way to inhibit the cell metabolism and reduce the energy given to these cancer cells, its growth will have to stop, and it will take one step closer towards curing cancer. And Jonas' example was specific to MPM, but once we figure it out within MPM, we can kind of get a grasp on cancer in general and then look to generalize. Another application of cell metabolism is just the future of science and biology and biological engineering. So cell metabolism can enhance mesenchymal stem cells, also known as MSC, not to be confused with Mellon College of Science, and more specifically, its transplantation survival. So MSC is a key part of biomedical engineering and tissue engineering, and they're researching MSC quite a bit, but one of the biggest issues with it right now is that it has very unpromising results due to its lack of survival at the transplantation at the transplantation stage, and more importantly, because of a lack of energy. So if we can find a way to improve its cell metabolism and work more efficiently, this could be improved greatly. And obviously, stem cells are quite important in tissue engineering because stem cells are one of the most important things for repair and health in general. And then since cell metabolism is the most foundational form of gaining energy, if we want to make progress in scientific engineering, we're going to need to use it as much as possible so that we don't need to worry about energy in the future. And these are some of our citations.